Wonderful. So would it be wonderful if application could do things without us changing our code by themselves, waking and doing some processes? Well, in this session, I want to sparkle some imagination and showing how you could do that. Sparkle some awesomeness. It's in the title. I should use that word in your project. Would it be a new one or someone that already exists and how you could add more in it? Whoops, come on, voila. So today it's all about events. A blip over there, a buzz on the other place, and some action must happen, right? It's all like that. And we don't want to have to monitor everything. And serverless just came out and promised us to say, hey, you know what, like you don't need to manage that big infrastructure and everything. And that's wonderful. My background is a developer. So when I heard serverless, I was thrilled. I yelled. I was very happy. No more server. Wonderful. Extraordinary. But you know what? What they mean is less server. Because of course, server are there to stay. Like the code need to be sitting and get executed somewhere. But the fact is that we don't need to focus on that. We just need to focus on what, as a developer, I'm good at, building apps or processes or flows. So today, I want to show you exactly how, using mostly two of those tools, you could add some really cool effect to your projects. But just because maybe some of you don't know exactly, maybe you just jump on the train of serverless because your coworker, Bob, says that it was cool, but why serverless is that fun? Well, serverless is, there's no infrastructure management, meaning like you don't care much about it. That's really good. As a developer, I'm happy that I could focus on something else. Then it's event-driven, so exactly what we thought about that, where something happened, a blip, a buzz, a scan, an update, and our flow, our piece of code, something will get triggered, will scale, because I cannot have millions of connected cars with tons of sensors on each of them sending messages to my service without him choking. I need some scale. And that's the beauty of the serverless, is it will scale. Of course, I'll have some parameters, so I don't lose all my money on one night, but it can scale automatically. And the beauty of that is by scaling up and down automatically, and by the fact that I'm paying just for what I use. If, for example, a piece of code run for 1 second, it means, well, I'm paying for 1 second, not 1 minute or 1 hour, just 1 second. So you could really change your architecture of your project to make it very close to your demand. So that curve of demand, when it upscale and like the demand change, you could follow that very precisely. And that's really great. So of course, today we'll be focusing on two of those services, but there's plenty of them. And I just want to walk through quickly some of those. If you're interested to know more, learn more, there's a bunch of documentation on the documentation website of Microsoft. And all of those, of course, will run on Azure and other clouds, and even on-prem, and now with Arc, everywhere, just like was saying Sarah before me. So API management, it's wonderful when you have a bunch of API that you want to offer to your client to consume to build their app. You could put proxy security, scale them, package them, add security, and it's all hosted somewhere else. It will scale. Really, really useful. Like I say, I'm passing quickly through those because the focus of this talk is really to pass through in details to specific project, but I still want to explain what other services are available. So there's the service bus that is really reliable cloud messages. So when you have tons of messages with different queue and stuff like that, you really need this service bus. A really great tool for that. And of course, with all the sensor, when you have a lot, I was just talking about, having an endpoint choking, you need the event grid to help you doing those kind of things. But one of the hero of today, or at least in my presentation, is the Azure function. So we'll have event and then a piece of code, because an Azure function is code base. And then we'll have some output. So there's many different connectors or triggers for events. There's my piece of code, and there's some kind of output. What is really great about the Azure function is also that it's open source. The CLI, the toolings, everything is in GitHub. If you don't trust me, go there and check. You could participate, help in documentation, and you know what? They accept PR, so really interesting to explore. The other hero of today will be Logic App, Azure Logic App. So I really like that. So instead of being more code focused, Logic App is more flow. So it's a very graphical interface where you drag and drop and create interactivity, connection, integration, in fact, between other systems. So really useful. And it's most of the time on kind of default. When I need to automate some processes, I'm like, okay, how can I do that with Logic App and just like quickly do something? Really, really helpful. There's a little tool, a little sibling of Logic App that is very similar. I just want to flag it here. It's Power Automate. They are very close, and often people are not sure like what's the difference and stuff like that. So I don't want to get in trouble here, but at a very, very high level, I would say that Azure Logic App will live more in the Azure world. So it's over there. It could be single tenant, it could be multi-tenant, and the Power Automate is more for the Office 365 part. In fact, it's one is part of the license, that license, the other one, but mostly they have a very, very, very similar experience and power, I would say. Really helpful. But today, like I said, I'll be talking about Azure Functions and Azure Logic Apps. So Azure Function, I usually prefer C# and JavaScript, because that's the most language where like I could say I'm the most efficient, but there's many others. PowerShell, I will show an example in a few minutes, in fact, of PowerShell. Ruby, there are many, many others, and it's always evolving. In the Logic App, it's a more drag and drop, so really interesting, less code, it's very getting in the popularity, that less code thing. And the fun is that there's already tons and tons and tons of connectors. Connectors is very useful because you want to connect to something, and I will show you many different examples of that, to interact. So many different, and even you could create your own if you need to. So quickly, an example. So this is a Logic App interface, very simple. So when there's a HTTP request, I build that simple that example just to show how we can link them together. Very simple. When I have a call, an HTTP call, a GET, I will call that Azure function. And that HTTP GET, I can pass maybe in the query string a parameter. And then I will pass that parameter value to my Azure function, that simple hello world scaffold Azure function. Then I call that, and that result here in the create file segment, this is what we show here, we see the details here, well, then it will create a file in my OneDrive, because I create the connection here. So the beauty of it is Azure Logic App manage the connectivity for me. So that handshake security is all done in Azure. I don't need to manage and like pass the blah, blah, blah. No, it's all done for me. And also, as you can see, there's square here, for example, where it's a body. Then I don't need to type though, because that event before here, the trigger, the Logic App, the Azure function here box, there's properties, there's output. So in the context, it knows and it suggests me. So I say, you know what? In that Cloud Summit demo folder, create a file name called test with UTC now, and put the output body of this Azure function straight into the file, and then, get an answer. And this is my Azure function. So we see I'm receiving a parameter name, and I'm writing, hello, it's still me. And when I run that, I will just have a file, name exactly what I was expecting with the output. So this is really useful. And you could say, Frank, this is nice, but this is not what I was expecting. This is not awesome. This is just cool, but show me some awesome. So let's explore a little bit more real life scenario. And those are seriously projects that I use in my life, in the day-to-day, weekly. So I just want to give you some example, but I'm very curious if you want to tag me on some project you do, an example. I will have a lot of fun chatting about that. So let's get started. I have a few. So I do a lot of presentation, some demo, and of course, a lot of time we create resources. And like you, I don't like to pay for those resources if I'm not using them. So I created something that clean automatically my Azure subscription. I create an Azure function based on a schedule that will find my resources and just delete them. How can you find the resources you don't need, you say? Well, I just use the tag. In Azure, there's tags that you could add to any resources. So I just create a tag and I call it expired on. I could have called it anything. And then I put a date, the date where that resources would be expired. Every Monday, that Azure function get triggered, filter, find all those resources where the value of the tag expired on is expired in the past, and then just delete them. Maybe it's too scary for you to delete them. Well, you could just send an email if you prefer. The beauty of that is you could put all the pieces you want. Another one is updating charts, because we're all about the data and the boss like his pie chart, right? So every time you drop a file in a blob storage, in a OneDrive, in a Dropbox, in Google Drive, whatever, maybe it's in a database, then some data warehousing, some crunch process start with a logic app or Azure function, and it will just update the chart in Power BI. Everyone is happy. You don't need to do anything. It all gets triggered automatically. And that's the beauty of serverless. It's just events, right? Automatic resizing. Maybe you're having a website where people send pictures of their little kitty, or maybe it's their plant, bonsai, whatever, kayak, and they send huge images. But then, like you say, I would like to have square picture only because I build a gallery. So you could have some automated processes that will do that exactly for you. Well, we used to have that, Frank, like a long time ago in forums and stuff like that. Yes, but back in the day, your server was still always running and was waiting. Any file, that pooling effect. Now, if there's no new picture, the service is not running. So you're not paying for it. You'll only get spawn instantiate when there's a new picture to upload, and then it will process and turn off automatically after. That's the beauty of it. Another example, I built that last year. So with my team, we were creating a lot of videos and we wanted vertical video. So I said, that will be perfect. Let's use our phone. We all have phones. But the problem was on Android, it was MP4, and on iPhone, it was MOV. And the video editor tool that we were using didn't like that much MOV. So I was like, oh, but then maybe someone didn't have the converter and stuff like that. So I said, you know what? Just upload it in a OneDrive that we have, or it could have been a SharePoint, anything that makes sense for the team. And that will trigger a logic app, and I will use the media services, Azure Media Services, to automatically convert those files. And by the way, move them and rename them with our convention, and everything will be ready, and send you an email to notify you that, yep, you have all now your file. You could start working because everything is in MP4 now. So I created that. I spent just a few hours, and we could use that. My team is across the globe, so it was very practical to have everything done automatically. Another one, Sarah, just before I was watching her session, and she was talking about talent traders. So during Ignite the Tour, we were demoing this wonderful company. And one thing is they had that website, and they also had a web app, not a web app, a mobile app. And with that little button in the middle, Start Smart Shooting, then we implement that without changing the code. We just added a button. And then when you take a picture of that, and you can see here, I did very useful picture, a computer and a unicorn and a keyboard. Then that picture was uploaded, sent to Azure Vision AI, and then in the app, returning the result, I could read all that information. So instead of having just like a picture, now I could do research on that. And maybe, you know what, like I'm going shopping for a keyboard, then I could take a picture. The store can tell me, hey, I have other keyboards in stock. So like there's a lot of things like that you could do and plug, if I could say, many different services. Another one, we're using a lot of logic apps on that. So my team and I are running a show called Hello World. I don't want to get in trouble, but you know, like Wednesday and Thursday, 10 a.m. PST. We're using that, and for every episode, there's a lot of content that go there. For example, last week I was having a show about Cloud Summit. And when it's just an idea, I have one work item. I work in Azure DevOps to manage everything. So when it's an idea, like, hey, we should do something about Cloud Summit, I just have one simple work item with some contacts, you know, not much. But when we decide to move on, I need all those child work items because I have work to do in promotion, pre-prod, post-prod. I want more detail for every part of the show and stuff like that. I don't want to need to create all those requirements and fill that up every episode. Well, like, you know, like there's twice every week. So it's a lot of work to be not productive. So of course we created something to automate it. We created a logic app. And this one, I just want to go deeper and have a look quickly to each part of it, because I want to show that you could plug and do many different things inside an Azure logic app. So I cut it in pieces, and we'll pass 4 pages going a little bit more precise. So for example, this one, when a work item is created, I will initialize some variable, get the child, and just look at it and say, okay, is it my template? Here we could say I'm looking for my template. And that was the screenshot I showed you previously. And then if yes, perfect, let's continue. And if not, then I could log some analytics, log some error, because it's important to log. It will really help to debug. Even if in Azure Logic Apps, you can debug when there's a problem. So I have condition here. I have loops. So if we see here, I will be looping through the child. I will even have nested loops, looking for my English words here, nested loop to go to all the child and subchild and folder and subfolder to get all that information that I need and copy those. And we can see here that little logo, it's my connector to Azure DevOps. I didn't need to know how like an API or like how handshaking and configure it. No, I go in Logic App, I say I want to create that, I want to connect to my Azure DevOps, and boom, voila, I got it. So all that automatically, really cool. I read a lot, but I don't like to read on my monitor. I like to read on an e-reader. I create something, a Logic App, that will just, when I call it with my URL, so I have a little bookmarklet, so a bookmark, but with JavaScript code in it. It calls a Logic App, sending the URL of the page I am. That thing will clean up everything on the page, so I don't want to see any ads, just the article. It will clean up everything using a library that I found called Mercury Parser. And then I have that in an Azure function, clean that, and the best converter, so the way you can send a document on that e-reader, the best way to do that is to send an email with a Word document. But I have an HTML page, so I use Pandoc, so I create on the spot an Azure container instance with Pandoc. Apparently, it's the best converter ever. And I just do that. And it runs automatically. And every Monday, because I'm publishing my notes, that's my way to Google myself, because I always remember, yeah, I read an article about something, then now I could do that. All that logic app calling a sub logic app, like you could go complex. And that's what I want to explain. Sometimes we see example where it's very like every time a tweet, but you could do very complex stuff and it's scale. And then, in my case, have my blog post ready. I could even publish it, but because, I type on my e-reader with my big thumbs, I prefer reading it. But I could have done all that automatically. So this is how you sparkle awesomeness in your project using Azure Serverless. I'm Frank Boucher, and now I will take your questions.